Hey everybody, welcome back to the Downpour, Emerald City Hockey, and Circling Seattle Sports Seattle Torrent podcast. Charles, it has been way too long since we've been able to record one of these. Both of our schedules through December were very busy. I was traveling. I had to travel three separate times, all back to back. Don't recommend that, by the way. Horrible idea to stack three different travel things all next to each other. But we are back and we get to talk about the Seattle Torrent. And you know what? I guess being gone for a little while does have a benefit, and that is there are plenty of games that we can look at and look at the trends with this team and kind of
Right.
break down what's been happening.
Yeah, no, you missed me so much that you decided to wear dark green like I am, and we've got our glasses on. So we're very similar in every aspect.
Yes.
No, yeah, it's been tough, because what you missed a few of the home games, right? And it's
Mhm.
especially that Montreal game for them to finish off on a good note. So yeah, plenty to talk about. I mean, like you mentioned, trends, definitely some things that stick out to you over the course of these games, right? You don't want to necessarily break every game down minute by minute, but there you start to see some things that maybe paint the bigger picture of this team as they get through this inaugural season.
Yeah, and we will start with the bigger picture and we can talk about how the Torrent did during this stretch. So going back to that home game against Ottawa, they take that one 4-1. They beat the Charge at home mid-December. Follow that up with a loss to the Boston Fleet at home. That was a tough game. I watched that one from LA. That one was a tough game. They fall 3-1 to Boston there. And then you mentioned it, the last game of the homestand was that incredible one against Montreal. Seattle picks up the 2-1 victory. Hannah Murphy in net, just absolutely incredible. Stops 37 of 38 shots. Really just out duels Andrene Debian on the other end, which is not an easy thing to do for anybody, much less a rookie, only a couple starts into your professional career. But Hannah Murphy got it done. And that was definitely the game where I was feeling the most, homesick, if you will, for not being at Climate Pledge Arena and seeing that one. I'm sure the atmosphere in the building for that was incredible.
Yeah, it's been well. That's another thing too that we can mention, Dylan, is the consistency of the attendance. You
Hmm.
look at there's a lot been made kind of the attendance of the takeover tour games, right?
Yeah.
As the league goes through that, but it's been great to see at least 8,000 plus. I made a very super basic graph about it, and it kind of largely was encouraging for some people to see how well the games have been because you start out with 16,000 in the home opener, which is great, but then you kind of drop a little bit. But ever since then, the attendance numbers have gone up. They hit
Yeah.
10,000 a couple times, which is great to see. So yeah, you couple that with beating a Montreal team that before New York's sudden rise, which will I'm sure I have a mention on. I thought Montreal might be the second best team in the league. Just especially what you mentioned on Rene Desbiens, but that line of Laura Stacy, Marie Philippe Poulin, and then Abby Roque. I mean, that's there's a
It's
lot
a
of
crazy
firepower,
line. Yeah.
right? So, yeah, no, that's great. And you mentioned Hannah Murphy. I mean, have the legend continue there, and yeah, I just continue to feel silly that I wasn't quite prepared for this to happen after they took her in the second round. I was very much like, why are we taking a goalie here? But hey,
It's because
Megan
she's pretty
Turner goes
good,
fourth with
Charles.
me. Yeah.
Turns out that was a pretty smart move, actually. But yeah, incredible game from Hannah Murphy there. We'll talk about that. Yeah, you mentioned the attendance. I mean, this was a Tuesday night game, 2 days before Christmas. So you have people traveling in and out of town, all of that kind of stuff. Busy time. You got family commitments all over the place, and still over 10,000 people packed Climate Pledge Arena to watch that game, and they were very much rewarded with a great, fantastic hockey game to see. Then the Torrent go on the road. They're still on the road, but they went on the road. Did the Takeover Tour game in Dallas, Hannah Bilka's hometown. They go in there and lose a rough one against New York. It was a 4-3 final in favor of New York. Lots of weird things about this game, though. It felt like we'll get into like the Terralova suspension and hit
Hmm.
on Serfilier in a little bit. But for me, the big like standout thing from this game was just the Torrent losing the special teams battle, right? New York goes 2 for 5 on the power play. Seattle 0 for 4 on the power play, which kind of started a trend for the Torrent. Well, it started in the game prior, but of not being able to get things done with the player advantage on the power play. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But this one was just kind of a rough game all the way around. And really also the first game that Hannah Murphy kind of got tagged with a lot of goals. Gives up 4. Granted, on 41 shots, like it was not like it's on Hannah Murphy. It was a rough game defensively and kind of just a rough game all around for the Torrent.
Right. And this is, what makes the PWHL so fun, even besides the Torrent, right, is just the level of talent on every single team. Like Casey O'Brien, super exciting young player for New York, gets a hat trick. Not great to see it happen against Seattle, but gets a hat trick for all her first 3 goals in the league. And yeah, as you mentioned, 41 shots. I mean, Hannah Murphy has seen a solid amount of volume in terms of shot throughout the course of the season. But yeah, I mean, 5 power plays, which is something I'm sure we'll bring up again. Yeah, no, I mean, it's difficult to ask that much, especially when they did the ride the hot hand, which I don't think is the wrong thing to do. I'm not gonna argue against that. I'm just saying, like, things will build, right? But yeah, I mean, New York's fast, young. They'll be exciting. I mean, high event, they'll be interesting, but this game might have woken them up. So
I was gonna say, yeah, it definitely seems to have woken them up. Unfortunately, the Sirens are really going on a tear right now. And they are a good young team, a fun team to watch. Play very like kind of wide open, fast. Just try to get the puck up the ice, get in position to score, and it's fun hockey. I question like how long it can kind of last. Like I feel like that's going to be a streaky team, just because teams like that tend to be streaky. It's working great when you're converting on all of those chances, the odd player rushes that you're getting, all of that kind of stuff. Very easily flip the other way around and you just start giving up all of those chances instead, because you don't have that structure to help you out defensively. But for right now, New York's going with it, and they were able to pick up the win there in Dallas. Then Seattle on the road goes up to Hamilton to take on the Toronto Scepters. Torrent able to win that one in the shootout. Charles, first time we get to see the shootout for the Seattle Torrent there, and overtime and all of that good stuff. Well, you're already holding your chest. Is it bringing back memories of how tense you were watching the shootout?
Listen, between the soccer teams here and the hockey teams, the penalty shootout, both in soccer and hockey, there's too much. My heart will stop eventually, I think. But no, I mean, this one, yes, it was a bit nerve wracking, just because, I mean, this is a game that Seattle had to come back in, right? I mean, Alex Carpenter gets the 50-point mark in the NHL. Nope. PWHL.
Yep.
The third player to do so, first American-born player to do so in dramatic fashion, scores late. Thought Seattle had the better of the chances in the overtime period, and then it goes to the shootout. And I was kind of wondering, because the PWHL shootout is different. I need to say that first, right? Because you can send players back out. So Hannah Bilka got 2 attempts. So that was kind of interesting to see. I'm not used to that, right? But this game was fun for a few different reasons. Corinne Schroeder gets her first win of the season.
Yep.
I've been pretty vocal about how I felt like she's played throughout the course of the year. So that was cool to see. Anna Wilgren's shootout was disgusting.
That was so sick. That was so cool.
That really kind of makes you open your eyes a bit more.
Well, and just also, sorry to cut you off, but the fact that second shooter in the shootout is a defender in Anna Wilgren, right? Like that Steve O'Rourke is just like, hey, no, she's got it. I'm gonna send her out there, and she definitely had it. Converts on that one, able to put the Torrent up by 2 at that point, and only the second round of the shootout. But I mad respect to head coach Steve O'Rourke for going ahead and putting the defender out there in the shootout, and not like waiting until round 7 or something to do it. Just being like, no, our second best shootout shooter does play on the blue line, and she's going out there and she's going to score for us, and she did.
Right, because it's not something that I would have predicted. Maybe not Wilgren. I thought maybe you could argue someone who moves the puck like Caleb Barnes, but
Mhm.
I mean, goodness, it is always kind of fun to pay attention to that part of practice, right, where they do attempt. I will say, if we ever get to it, I don't know if we will. Emily Zungwinkel has done great in every
She
shootout.
does.
She's remarkable. So if we ever get to that point, remember this episode
Yes.
specifically. But yeah, no. So yeah, to see her do that, I think Hannah Bilka did try her move that scored her the first goal of the shootout a second time, which didn't quite work. Reagan Kirk saw that the second time.
Yeah.
But then the other side, I mean, Corinne Schroeder to stop all four attempts that she saw was great. That can be a little nerve wracking. So no, it was nerve wracking to have to go to a shootout because Seattle teams had done that in consecutive days by the time this had happened. But great to see that happen, and props to Hamilton, right? They were able to have the Takeover Tour logo on the ice.
Yep.
There was certainly an argument that Hamilton made to bring a team there, and truthfully, that's on me. I know a little bit about their WHL team, but I didn't really have too much background on Hamilton, right? So
Mhm.
it's cool to see that and see how the different Takeover Tour stops will go. You know what I mean? But yeah, the shootout didn't necessarily have that on the bingo card to be the reason that they would get their first road win as a franchise. But hey, I'll take it.
Yeah, it will be interesting, and we won't talk about it today because there's so much we got to catch up on with the torrent. But in the future, when we talk again about PWHL expansion and everything, where Hamilton might fit into all of that, because if just being somebody who's followed the NHL for as long as I have, that's always been a big thing. Is there's always somebody in Hamilton, some billionaire trying to get an NHL franchise, whether it's through expansion or buying a struggling team and moving them to Hamilton. It's been one of those kind of on the fringes of the NHL for a really long time. It certainly has a passionate hockey fan base. I think that was, they showed up and put on a good show there for this game between the Torrent and the Scepters, and I think that they definitely made their case that come expansion time for the PWHL for next season, when we might see four additional teams added to the league, they want to be in that conversation, as they've been trying to be in the NHL conversation for a long time now. Um, so there's a long history of Hamilton trying desperately to get a professional hockey team there. We'll see if the PWHL is able to make it happen with them. And then finally, the final game here, Charles, is the game that just happened. We're recording this podcast it's less than half an hour after this game finished, and that was Seattle going to Boston and falling to the Fleet 2-1. Obviously this game is very fresh on both of our minds. We just watched it. It just finished. The name of this game, though, for me is, again, special teams. The Torrent 0 for 1 on the power play. Don't get a power play until what? There was like 3 minutes left in the game, just about.
Right.
Yeah, about 3.5 minutes left on the clock when they finally get their power play opportunity. But prior to that, they had given the Fleet 5 power play opportunities. Now, credit to the PK unit for the Torrent. Boston only was able to convert on one of those 5 opportunities, but well, I kind of one of the goals for Boston was scored right after a power play, so there was still like some lingering things around that. But it was or was it? No, it wasn't. No, it was just to start the period. Never mind. Ignore me. Uh
Uh,
but yeah, it was just a tough game all the way around. Torrent just not able to stay out of the box at all.
oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. They did during the game they hadn't marked it as a power play goal for Megan Keller, but it was a power play goal, so I thought I
Yeah.
was losing my mind. Yeah, no, it's tough. I mean, it's we talked about this last episode, right? With because there were several games they had killed them all off, or seemingly all of them, right? I think
Yeah.
they were 9 for 10 at a point, but giving up 4 power plays, like the numbers don't work in your favor if you're going to give a team that many looks,
Yeah.
especially in this league. Like if and hopefully they do, right? But if this league gets to a point where you've got the dilution of talent, so to say, then sure, maybe you can get away with it. But when you've got the best players in the world jam packed into 8 teams, it's very difficult. And especially when you're playing the best team in the league, that's maybe got a little bit more oomph behind them, since it's their first home game in like a month. But yeah, no, I mean, I have been really impressed by the majority of this PK. When they do get the change in, right, from
Yeah,
the rule that they've got. Lexi Agia has been big. There have been a few different players that have been really big on their PK, but Lexi sticks out to me. It always seems like she
for
makes a
sure.
big play or two.
Wins the
But yeah,
face-offs on him too a lot of the times as well.
right.
Once she has to come out there, take that like kind of first face-off after you get the change, and she does a great job on those.
Which it's something, and I know we'll talk about it, Dylan, right? But it
Yeah,
just adds to like that third line and what they do. It's really fun to look at that, because I know that was something maybe that we were worried about, was what it would look like behind the two lines, the two top lines for Seattle. But
hmm
yeah, to get back to this game specifically, um, I mean, the Hannah Bilk interference, which is the first penalty you give up, comes right after she has a great scoring chance,
hmm
and it's kind of
big
maybe
momentum swing.
right. Um, the Brooke Bryant delay a game in the second period where you give them 3 looks on the power play. You're able to kill all of them off, but to have that middle frame mucked up isn't great. The Brooke Bryant delay a game is just, hey, we can't get this out of our zone. And then the Kayla Barnes one, I know maybe that goes into one of the trends we wanted to look at,
hmm
but I mean, you just can't take that.
No.
37 seconds before you go to the intermission, you've already survived the period
Yes.
effectively, and didn't get hardly any shots. I don't think in that. Sorry, 2 shots. Two
Two
shots.
shots during that, but very much in the middle of a sequence where the Torrent in this one go over 17 minutes between shots on goal.
Right. At that point, I just need you to get to the room, right?
Yes.
Like, let's just get out of here. Play smart. Obviously, I'm sure there's some things that can happen in the heat of the moment, but that's not great. And the Megan, I'm interested to hear your thoughts more on the check to the head, because I know that got reduced from a major.
Mhm.
Um, but it does bring up the physicality question that we've kind of raised both here and then in just talking between ourselves. It's just, at the end of the day, you can't give anybody 5 looks on the power play, let alone the best team in the league. But at the end of the day, the penalty kill keeps you in this game. You could make the argument that Boston should have had 3 or 4, in,
Yeah.
in total in this game. So I don't know. That was just kind of a blurt, but it feels like the penalty kill has done a lot for you, but you're also asking too much of them.
You are, and especially in a game where you're playing against Boston, you're playing against Boston at home too, where they've been incredible. Going into this game in games in Massachusetts, Aaron Frankel had only allowed 1 goal in 3 games, right? More shutouts than goals against. You're able to get one on her, but like it just goes to show you were going to be fighting an uphill battle against the top team in the league, a team that is excellent when they're in Boston, a team that has the best goaltender in the world, right? In Aaron Frankel. I don't think that that's up for debate at all. The last thing you want to do when you're walking into a situation like that is give that team 5 cracks at the power play, right? Like that's just not going to work for you. And I think in a lot of ways, yeah, the Torrent lose this one, but I think they're kind of lucky to only walk out of there having lost by 1 and having the opportunity to potentially tie it late in the mad scramble that they had there, kind of coming off the power play and then right into an empty net situation and trying to get stuff there. But like that is the kind of stuff that you cannot afford to do when you're playing the top team in the league, a team that's great at home, a team that has a netminder like Aaron Frankel that's not going to give you many chances to beat her. Right. And it's not just Frankel, it's the defense in front as well, which was
Right.
fantastic tonight for the Fleet. You have to play more disciplined than the Torrent played tonight, and especially the Kayla Barnes roughing call. Like that's just one that you can't take. And I do want to ask the general question about things, but I will kind of just start with this one and with Kayla Barnes, because it has been a trend that I feel like we've noticed so far this season. As great as Kayla Barnes is as a defender, She moves the puck incredibly well. Her abilities in the offensive zone are fantastic. She can find a way to shoot through a million bodies, it feels like, and that shot's going to end up on net, right? Like, she has such a great sight line for those shooting lanes. Always knows who to move it to, if she's out there as part of the power play. But there are times where it feels like maybe a temper creeps in there and gets the better of her, and she'll take one of these undisciplined calls, and it just sometimes you just like, oh, what are you doing? Like, you just can't afford to do that. And it felt like this one was kind of that way, where she was already engaged physically, and then she just
Yeah.
decided, you know what, I'm just going to end this in kind of a violent way and just really cross-checked her opponent into the ground. And it's like, I get it, it's frustrating, and you're battling, and it's physical, and it's a physical sport, it's hockey, but you have to know the league that you're playing in. And this is
Right.
kind of my question for you, Charles, and that is this team too physical for how the PWHL calls games?
I
And sorry, go for it.
No, 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 no. I think I think they are. I mean, I think it's a yes. Just given the if you were just going to ask, are they too physical? I'd say no. I think,
Mhm.
they from the jump, Dylan, this is a team and a franchise that has wanted to be what? Fast and physical. They've done that, but
Yeah.
to a fault, right? To answer the full question though about to how this league is officiated, yeah, they are. They are too physical for this. It's been interesting because I believe it was the Sirens Dallas takeover game with the Terralova hit, where that was also maybe kind of as you talk about with how the Barnes, like, I'm just going to end this with the Terralova hit. There was the Fillier hit, kind of gets in her face, and Netta doesn't like that. And if even just being around her a little bit, obviously we haven't covered her for years, but
Mhm.
being around Netta, she's not an angry person,
No.
So I will say this. I want to say this on the record. I don't like the terminology of calling her dirty or a headhunter or a thug or anything like that. I think that's a bit extreme.
Yeah.
Like, we can all say that was a bad hit. It
Yeah.
was great. Up in the head, not great. Up near the head, I know Fillier, I think, was day to day, and she came back and played, I think, the rest of the game, but I believe she was day to day in the days after that. We can all just acknowledge the hit wasn't great, But then you're in open ice. I mean, that's where I get to comparing it to the Barnes hit, because it's like, hey, I know you don't like that, but you go into open ice there and you just take yourself out of the game. And now 2 games. I thought Lindy Lobdella slotted in well. She was
Mhm.
actually the 7th D in that game against New York, so it worked out decently because she had already played
Yeah.
in Tarlova's absence when she was down with injury. But you want to build as much chemistry as you can, and unfortunately, you're as great of a player as you can be. You're going to captain Team Czechia. You've missed 4 games. You know, like, that's important time for you. That's what the Minnesota game and then the Sirens game that you're out. The first 2 games at home that you miss. And now you miss what the Scepters game and this game against the best team in the league. Both in terms of building chemistry and playing the best of the best. This team needs you.
Mhm.
So given the way that this is officiated, and I'm all for protecting people, right?
Yeah.
But just with how it's officiated right now, because none of these players, Dylan, are afraid of contact, right?
No.
Just talking to them in training camp, they said they encourage that. Like Lobdell, certainly Lobdell, Brown have talked about that. So
Right.
this isn't just like, oh, I'm learning how to hit. No, they know how to hit.
Yeah.
It's just this is how this is being enforced. And so, you know, at least for this year, like, unless they do anything in the offseason, you've got to be smarter. You've got to adjust, and so that you're not hurting your team.
Right. And it is those open ice hits through the neutral zone.
Right.
There's the Terralova hit, which I'll go on the record, I do think was suspension worthy. Like, she basically only caught Fillier's head. Like that is, it's a bad hit in any league. That needs to be a suspension. I'm okay with that. I do
Right.
think also, I will acknowledge, a little bit of a suicide pass that Fillier had to deal with, that puck in her skates, has to look down, lowers her head. It then becomes an unfortunate situation, but Terralova has to be responsible for her own body. Like that's how those things I think should be called in any hockey league or around the world. You know, it's an unfortunate situation. I don't think Terralova was going to just try to only make contact with Fillier's head, but that is the end result, and you have to be punished based on the end result. So I was okay with that in that sense on the Terralova thing. I don't know that Terralova needed to be going all out on that hit to begin with. Like
Right.
she was really selling out to try to stop Fillier there because she was upset about the hit that Fillier had given, just moments before. And so again, it's one of those, you have to stay disciplined and you have to kind of understand the situation and everything. And so I think Terralova did put herself in the situation where she could end up with a suspension worthy hit.
Right. And I'm not going to deny any of that. I just didn't like some of the immediate,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, that was, yeah, totally. Everything else, I mean, yeah, you got to live with the consequences of your actions. So yeah, I want to make
It's
sure it's
life.
not like, oh, he wants her to head up. No, 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 no. I just
Yeah.
didn't like calling this because she's got no history of this, right?
Right.
You know, unfortunate that the emotion gets the better of her in that regard. That happens in sports. Like you get really upset. That happens. I've had it happen. I mean, I got really angry at a lot of things. It's probably why I didn't keep playing, but here we are.
Yeah. But as far as like the team playing physical, and like in this one, you get both Hannah Bilka takes a penalty with an open ice hit in the neutral zone, and then late Megan Carter also gets penalized for a check to the head. And then I love this on the PWHL website, bracketed accidental. And that is, of course, the major that was walked down to just a 2 minute
Right.
check to the head from Megan Carter. Now, on replay, I don't know that Carter ever makes contact with the head. It looked like it was mostly to the chest and shoulder. It doesn't matter though that this league takes hits to the head extremely seriously, and this is, I guess, the point that I think both of us want to get to, which is you just have to understand how this league is going to be officiated, and the officiating has been consistent about this, and that's what you want from officiating. Like, I'm not saying that the officiating is wrong for thinking this way or for calling the things that they're calling. I think that they are calling it the way the league wants it to be called and to the way the rules are written, and they are being consistent about it. And that is, at the end of the day, all you can ask for from officials on the ice, is to be consistent and call things in a consistent manner so that you can play around it. And I just think the Torrent right now aren't doing a great job of playing around it. They're going for those big hits. They want to be physical. And look, this has been preached to us from day one. And it's been preached to the players from day one by general manager Megan Turner, who wanted a team that was going to play fast and physical, and from head coach Steve O'Rourke, who numerous times, and certainly all through training camp and everything, we want to be fast and we want to be physical. And all the players were coming out and doing their media availabilities with us saying, we're going to be fast, we're going to be physical. And they are playing that way. It's just, I think they have to learn that when teams are coming through the neutral zone, that's not going to be a time to be physical, because every time you're getting called for something. And so the league is telling you, be physical in your own zone, be physical on the forecheck, be physical like by the boards. But the big open ice hits that really like sit somebody down hard, the league does not seem to want those, and I think the Torrent have to adjust based on that. It is weird for me because like I look at that Megan Carter hit, and as somebody who grew up watching the NHL, I'm like, that play doesn't even like get acknowledged. It makes the highlight reel for being a big hit, and everybody just kind of moves on. But that is the way that the PWHL kind of wants things done this year in this league, and you have to play to that. The final thing on this though that I find interesting, Charles, is the Torrent go for these big hits. They're not actually hitting that much relative to other teams. I was looking at the Kyle Cushman master spreadsheet here because I was like, okay, where do the Torrent rank physically amongst the PWHL as a team as a whole? And I was looking on the player side of things, hits per 60, and I was like, oh, it's really just Jenna Buglioni and Megan Carter in like the top group of hits per 60 for the player side of things. So then I go over and I check on hits per game for the teams, and the Torrent are only averaging 13.1 hits per game, Charles, which is in the bottom half of the league. They're 5th in the league in hits per game. And obviously, you can't go just based on raw hits numbers because the Torrent have played fewer games and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, hits per game, they're averaging a lot less. Like you look at Vancouver's leading the league in hits per game at 19. Like they're I I was really surprised to see
Huh.
that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, when you were, kind of building into this, I guess my thought process is that they certainly have a lot of players that can really lay the body. Like, obviously, like again, Megan Carter, the pairing of Megan Carter and Lindy Lovdell
It's
is
insane.
terrifying.
I would
I
not
would
want to
not,
skate up the ice against them at all.
no. I think I mentioned it in the last episode that we did, but she had a quote in talking to me where she said, "The league is fun because you can see your best friends one day and then the next day put them through the boards." I'm like, that like
That's
talk
a
about a
quote.
defenseman quote,
Yeah.
right? Emily Brown can do it. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily think of Caleb Barnes as doing it, but then she gets the roughing. You know, and yeah, Jenna Buglioni. I mean, that's not too surprising. Like, so yeah, I mean, at least when I think of the defenders, I would expect maybe more because of the players that I just mentioned, but also Carter and Lovedale, I guess, are technically the third pairing on this team, so there's less minutes for them. But even with this third line that I know we'll get to, like Lexi Agia has mentioned her and Natalie Snodgrass being two forwards that can go and be heavy into the boards.
Mhm.
So that is a little bit surprising to me. One for just some of the personnel that you've got. Also, like players like Hillary Knight aren't small either, right? Um, but also, because of the messaging that you brought up, right? Like it's very clear the messaging
Yeah.
that from the top down has been drilled into our heads. So when I see people like, "Oh, what's the identity?" I was like, "What do you mean? What's the identity?" That's all I can think about is them telling me what the identity is going to be. So that is, yeah, I did not expect that. Huh? There you go, stat guy over here.
Yeah, no, it was an interesting one to see for sure. Now, you mentioned the third line, and I do want to get to the third line here. First line, obviously, for the Torrent has been incredible. Yeah, we're gonna kind of gloss over them right now, but like Julia Gosling, Hillary Knight, Alex Carpenter, doing incredible stuff game in, game out. Very much as advertised, all three of those players. They're going to be big deal at the Olympics for all their respective countries, or at least we assume on the Julia Gosling front because we're still waiting for Canada's roster for some reason. But I have a good feeling that she's going to be there and be in the top six for them. Um, so I don't want to just act like we're ignoring them. They're fantastic. They continue to be
They're doing what they
fantastic.
should be doing.
They're doing exactly what they should be doing. This third line though is playing really well, and it does feel like before I had to leave town, with the games that were at home. Uh, you look at the New York game, that New York home game. I had talked about during that game before the big comeback at the end, and you get the goals and the victory and all of that. Um, I was like, wow, Lexi Agia is like my player of the game for the Torrent, right? She was all over the place,
Yes.
incredible on the forecheck. She's always incredible on the PK. But I felt like that third line was really getting going with her, Bucky, and Snodgrass. They were playing really well, and they've just continued to kind of go from there. And then you look at the last couple games before tonight, and they all start scoring. Right, Grant Mentis gets a goal. Agia gets goals in two consecutive games, and I think that we talked with Steve O'Rourke kind of back after those first couple home games about that line, and he had said that that's their energy line. That he had had the conversation with them before the season started. That hey, look, I know you're great players. We're going to need something a little different from you because we have all this talent up top and we have the top six that we have. We're going to need you guys to kind of be this energy line to go out there, play physical, really force other teams back on their heels. And then over the course of the season, once we kind of get that down, start opening you guys up, have you take advantage of the matchups that you guys are going to be receiving and things like that. And it felt like that was supposed to be like the season long plan of action for them, and instead it took about a month, maybe a month and a half, and all of a sudden they're just opened up. They are taking advantage of the matchups that they're getting, because the bottom line is I don't think many teams in this league, Charles, have a third line or have a bottom six that can go out there against this bottom six and win, right? Like how do you win? You have great forechecking ability from all three of them across the board. And then, yeah, now you're starting to see the finishing with the 3 goals that you've gotten from that line. I mean, it just kind of goes to show it's not just about the flashy kind of Olympic level players that you see up top with the Seattle Torrent team. It is that they are also still extremely deep, and this is the stuff that, yeah, I had some questions about it going into the season. Those questions are answered, and it's showing why this why the Seattle team was kind of so scary to so many fans of other PWHL units around the league.
Right. I mean, it's like, to again mention their physicality, like what third line, what bottom six is gonna go, hit for hit, and want to deal with Natalie Snodgrass, Michaela Grant Mentis, and Lexia Gia. But then you've got players like Bucky in the middle and Michaela Grant Mentis who who certainly has a lot of offensive skill. I don't want to just, reduce some players down to just, being fast and physical, right? Because I feel
Hmm.
like that's going to be like, I'm going to have those 2 words drilled in my brain. But, certainly has some offensive skill. I mean, that third line is your offense for what? Well, besides the Danielle Serdachny goal to begin things, which is interesting to see her at least get that one. That was nice to see.
Yeah.
But, goals 2 and 3 were Bucky later in that first period, and then Lexi Gia. And then, yeah, you mentioned Lexi keeping things going. It has been really fun to see them kind of carve themselves out, because if you're just looking at things in a super basic way, you could be like, yes, as you mentioned, the Olympic level talent that's here. But, it is fun to see them because I don't believe they scored today,
They
but
did not.
no, that's right, because it was just the one goal. But they were buzzing the last few games. I mean, when your power play is not necessarily doing anything, your PK is getting asked a lot. It's this third line that features a PKer who's getting things done, which is really fun. I've really enjoyed that, and it's really nice to see them get rewarded for, as you mentioned, a role that maybe isn't glamorous, that was established early on, and they get to be the ones that are doing are getting the rewards of the glamorous part of the game, right? So
Yeah.
no, that is quite fun. I don't think I expected this, as you mentioned, to have this happen right now. But if they're gonna get through this season and be where they want to be in their late push late in the year, it's gonna take things like this, stretches like this, where your depth will have to show out. Because, yeah, I mean, I know we brought it up in the beginning of the year, right, in terms of where the scoring might happen. I don't think we ever questioned the talent, that is up and down the roster. I mean,
Mhm.
maybe you could have questions about the fourth line, sure, but it's the fourth line. I mean, you're not going to be super worried about that. So, yeah, no, they've been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed that storyline because, as you mentioned, we're not glossing over
Yeah.
the Alex Carpenter, the Hillary Knight, but you know what they're going to give you. It was kind of maybe a question of what we'd see from this group that we're talking about in this third line here.
Yeah, exactly. And it was one where, I mentioned this on, I think, the very first episode of this podcast, that I was concerned about like how much goal scoring you could get from the depth on this team. And really, if you go back to training camp, um, this line that we're talking about now as the third line was potentially maybe going to be like the fourth line, at least the way things were kind of looking out. Like, remember, line rush times, Buglioni would be out there as centering the third line, and it was kind of featured around her and maybe trying to get more offense. And then you just had like a very pure checking line as that fourth line, and that's how they came out in Vancouver for the first game, was with that setup. But really, then you get the Buglioni injury and things kind of shifted a little bit. And now you start seeing this line centered by Grant Mentis with Agia and Snodgrass, and it's turned into something else. I think it's turned into something that this team really does need. Um, it's a great counterattack, or counter punch, I should say, after you throw the top 2 lines out there that are very skilled and defenses are having to deal with them. You then have this group come out there and yeah, they're scoring in a different way, but the point is they're getting goals, right? Yes, they're scoring off of being physical, getting the forecheck in there, trying to grind things out in below the goal line, into the corners. Very similar to how in hockey traditional third, fourth lines operate, and it's just such a pain in the butt to deal with if you're a defender. It really opens things up. I actually talked about this earlier today on the deep dive, talking about the Kraken's fourth line, but I think a lot of the
Mhm.
same stuff applies here. When you go heavy on the forecheck and you play below the goal line and you play to the corners and to the kind of the low outside areas of the offensive zone, it's you stretch the defense the most when you're doing that, because at least one defender has to now go below the goal line, has to go all the way out to the corner. They're well out of position because they're trying to go and retrieve that puck. A lot of times the second one has to get pulled out of position as well, the second defender, because they're having to play for passes out of that corner, and those passing lanes are not going to be in close around the net, so they're having to play out of position. Whatever F1, usually the center defensively for the other team, they're going to be in the corner with that first defender trying to win the puck battle and get the puck back. And so you really take the three top defensive players for the other team out of position when you can play below the goal line and into the corner. And then if you can then get the puck out of that corner quickly and back towards the slot, back towards that net front, usually there's just like a winger there left to defend, and you can take advantage of that matchup and you can usually get a chance from a high danger area. And when I watch the goals scored by this line, and I think about the one scored by Lexia Gia against Toronto in that last game, like that's what's going on, right? They're pulling and stretching these defenses out, and then you look at that one, and Lexia Gia is just completely alone in front of the net, to the point where not only does she get the initial shot off, but then she's able to collect her own rebound and
Yeah.
put that one in to score the goal. And so it's just kind of some great classic hardworking physical forechecking grinded out bottom six hockey, and it's really working for them. And it's great that they're forcing other teams to have to deal with that, because that's obviously not how a line with Julia Gosling, Alex Carpenter, and Hillary Knight's going to always play. They're going to be a little bit more skill based, and certainly the second line for the Torrent is going to play a little bit more skill based. But I really like seeing that and having that dimension to the Torrent, because it's going to lead to goals every so often through these games, and they're going to be big goals and help make a difference in the game for them.
100%. I mean, one thing I had thought about it when we were talking about it, but I didn't bring it up. But this is very stereotypical lunch pail, hard hat,
Yes.
bring it to you type of line. I think my only other like unique point to this is it's when does Natalie Snodgrass get a goal? Because the other two have goals. There were a few instances in this Boston game today, Dylan, where it seemed like she had some open ice, and I thought, okay, here it comes. But then she kind of takes the longer try to snipe it past Aaron Frankel, which that's not a great recipe against
Yeah.
Aaron Frankel, and I'd maybe want you to try and create a rebound. Um, but yeah, no, I mean it is fun, at least to see these bottom six lines when we talk about all of these things that you just mentioned, right? About what you traditionally would see from them come to fruition, right? Because you can be hard in the body and all that, and lay a couple hits here and call it a bottom six line. But for them to go to the hard areas, so many instances in my head over the last what are we 6 games since we last recorded,
Mhm.
where it's like I'm seeing Bucky drive through the slot and get to the crease with no problem, stuff like that. It's there's no fear in this line. I'm not
Not at
saying
all.
there is on any other line, but it's like they're going to make you feel that, so that's been a lot of fun. I would like to see Natalie Snodgrass get on the party too, because it was fun kind of seeing her other line mates get the goals and the glory, not this Boston game, but the last 2 games, in that regard.
Yeah, and I will say, Snodgrass is doing a lot of that hard work in the corner, where she's having to basically tank a lot of times 2-on-1 situations where she's protecting the puck in the corner and the other team's got a defender on her and then maybe a forward who's back checking, helping out. And Snodgrass is the one who has to hold on to the puck there and then move the puck out to those players that now have space. And so she hasn't been in the position yet to capitalize on the chances the way the other two members of her line have been. But the job that she is doing is setting up the ability for those goals to happen, and she is playing a big role in that. And I know it's one of those things where, yes, she doesn't get the highlight, she doesn't get that moment in the spotlight quite, but behind the scenes her teammates are giving her taps on the helmet for it, and the coaching staff loves to see that. And she's getting rewarded with 14 plus minutes a night, which I'm sure is, that is definitely more than what we were thinking she would get at the beginning of the season, I think, when looking at this lineup.
Right.
So she's getting that playing time. I want to talk about the second line before we kind of finish things out with the goaltending for the Torrent here. And the second line has been interesting, Charles, and I'm still trying to figure it out. So obviously you have Hannah Bilka, who is fantastic, picks up a goal tonight in the Boston game, the lone goal that the Torrent score. Beautiful release to just snipe it up and over Aaron Frankel. Great goal there from Hannah Bilka. Hannah Bilka now 7 points through 9 games. Great pace there. Been pretty as advertised, getting a lot of play on the power play as well. She's been a great player on the power play for them. Almost all the power play goals that they have this season, I feel like she's been a part of one way or another. But the rest of the line, Jesse Eldridge, I cannot help but watch Jesse Eldridge each and every shift that this line is out there, because I don't think a player on this team skates more than Jesse Eldridge. She plays down at the crease and net front on both ends of the ice. She's an incredible back checker, helps things out defensively, and then yet she's somehow also one of the players leading the rush when the second line is moving up the ice. She's part of that, and then she's battling it out net front in the offensive zone and trying to create chances and get screens on the goaltender there. I love the game that Jesse Eldridge has been bringing. She's just so snake bitten right now, Charles, and
Right.
tonight was another example of it. She was backdoor, had the opportunity to tip one in with under a minute to go, just missed it with the tip. It ended up going wide, but I feel like that's been the case all season. I was so happy to see her pick up her first goal of the season a couple games ago. But only 2 points through 8 games or 9 games now. It is not reflective of her play. She is playing fantastic hockey.
100%. I mean, I'm glad you bring up, not glad because the fact that it didn't go in, but glad that you bring it up just for the point with the late redirect, because I mean, great pass, right spot, exact right idea. Just unfortunate that puck doesn't go the way you want it to go. No, I mean, it's interesting when you think about the second line, right? Because I think we were texting during this game. I was like, okay, Hannah Bilk is Hannah Bilk. That shot, like, I kind of like with how we're talking about this first line. I don't expect a lot else from you. You're an Olympian. You're one of the best young forwards in this league. This isn't surprising. I will mention Daniel Serdachny in a minute, but with Jesse Eldridge, I wasn't sure what to expect, getting in her in here, but she was one of the leading point getters for the Sirens this past year, in addition to Alex Carpenter, of course. I mean, I know we talked also about the third line being stake bin to a point. I'm glad that they're getting the rewards now. I do wonder if they'll come in bunches for Jesse Eldridge. I had thought that after she had gotten the redirect against Boston and Seattle, that nice one past Abby Levy. But it hasn't quite gotten there, and it's tough because I agree. I mean, she's been in the right places. She's doing what the process. I'm going to use this word again. I think I used it last episode. The process is there, and I'm happy with that. Like, at some point, all you can do is be happy with the process. I'm not going to get mad at you and tell you to do something different, because why would I do that if you're doing the right things? No, I think it's just tough. You're not getting some bounces. She's in the right places. She's doing all you can ask her to. I am interested though to get your take, not to maybe hijack and or Tate like turn it,
Mhm.
Dylan, on Sir Dacne, because it does feel like she does a lot. I mean, she draws the power play
Yep.
in this Boston game to get you this, gets Jimmy Lee Radtree to get the hooking call. I know that you and I think we talked about this off camera, but she's that line is dealing with some matchups and with the speed what she can do as a skater. I know Danielle's going to have to deal with a lot, right? But
Mhm.
it does feel like I'm maybe not seeing her in some of the spaces that I am some of her line mates. And I get that that'll come as she's a center, right? But I'm interested to hear what you think about what it is because I know, technically with leaks and reports, right? She was the first Torrent player that they were going to sign in the
Right.
summer, and I thought, okay, of everything that I learned about Danielle was that she was like this is an underrated pick for people to have break out, and at least in terms of the points, the point production isn't there yet. She gets that goal against New York, and you're really happy for her, but I'm intrigued because at least going goal score wise on the master sheet, as you brought up earlier, you have to go down quite a bit to
Yeah.
find Sudakny. So I'm just interested to see what you're seeing and or not seeing from her because it's I'm not writing anybody off, but it is kind of interesting to see how we've gotten to this point where like, hey, what's going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, 2 points through 9 games from Serdakny is not really what anybody expected coming into the season, and she's really why the second line is like an enigma for me. Because like with Jesse Eldridge also only having 2 points, you can say like, well, she's been unlucky. Her shooting percentage is low this year compared to her first 2 years in the league. She's just she's playing the right way. She's playing the way that she's always played. She's produced in the past. One can assume that the production will come for Jesse Eldridge in the future as long as she just sticks with it. She's just going through a dry spell. Serdakny, though, things definitely feel different. And Serdakny was one of the players that through training camp, I know I talked with you, I mentioned it on the podcast with RJ. I really thought was going to be like a breakout player. I was like, okay, everybody's going to pay attention to the first line. We're watching what Serdakny's doing during training camp and how fast she is, how fast she can get the puck up the ice and puck handle at speed. I thought this is a player that's going to be really, really difficult for other teams to deal with. And then the game started and we just haven't seen it. It has not translated from practice, from training camp into the games themselves. And at first I was like, okay, what's going on here? Maybe it's just a slow start. And then we pieced it together and we did talk about this on previous episodes that, oh, okay, she's being used and the second line is being used as the matchup line through the home games, right? For those of you who don't know kind of how hockey works, the home team is the second team to put out their line on the ice. And so what that allows you to do when you're the home team is line match is what it's called. So you can look and see if the other team is putting their top line out there, you can then go and put whatever line you want to try to play defensively against them and take them out of the game out there on the ice because you get to decide second who you're putting out there. And it seemed like through all those home games, that's what Steve O'Rourke was doing with the second line was they were the ones that were having to go out there and face the top line of Minnesota. They were the ones having to go out there and face the top line for New York and for Boston and all of that stuff through those home games. And so it was like, okay, I get why the production isn't there. They have a really difficult assignment. Their main job and their main focus is to take the other team's top players out of the game. That's fine. That's an extremely respectable job on a hockey team, and it's a very difficult thing to do. And it does speak to the trust that Steve O'Rourke has in them. And I do think that a lot of that is because of Serdakny and her ability to play defensively and get things done in her own zone. What has been curious is now that they're on the road, Steve O'Rourke doesn't have the ability to line match anymore. He's just got to send whatever line he wants to over the boards, and then the other team's going to go kind of from there. And so the line matchup thing doesn't really hold, and yet we're not outside of the one goal that Serdakny scores against New York and Dallas. We're still not seeing really any production. And when I watch these games, I'm just not noticing her out there on the ice that much. It doesn't feel like she's making a big impact. And then this is the last thing, and I'll let you speak about it, Charles. Her ice time is down. significantly from where the season started. And if you go to her page on the PWHL
Um,
website and you go down to the game by game and you just look at the ice time, she starts the season with pretty healthy numbers. Nearly 20 minutes game one, 19 minutes game two, close to 18 game three, 19 game four, over almost 21 minutes game five. But after that, things really, really drop off, and you're starting to look at 16, 13 and a half, 17,
yeah.
14 tonight. Like, that's significantly less ice time. And I do think that some of that is because the third line is playing and producing well right now. And this second line, with the exception of Hannah Bilka, isn't. And I think that Steve O'Rourke's just having to ride the hot hand here, which, as a coach, you have to do that. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this continues to develop. I don't have a great answer for why Serdachny's not really producing and why the second line isn't producing more. But that's just kind of my overall read on this situation. Because again, high draft pick Serdachny in Ottawa, but also didn't produce there. So it's making me now question, maybe it wasn't just a usage situation in Ottawa. Maybe there just is something kind of here with Serdachny.
Right. No, and I was interested because there were some moments in this game, like I think the speed is evident
Yeah.
when you see her get on the puck. It's like you'll recognize that. There was one, it might have been that final push where I saw her kind of keep some things alive, right? She's, with her speed and her skating ability, she's keeping things alive by just keeping things on the outside, keeping things along the wall, and keeping possession, which is good. You want to see that. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm not, like I was kind of mentioning, like when in comparison to Eldridge, which I realize, again, difficult to directly compare center for to a winger, but I'm not seeing her rip shots. I don't think her shot necessarily is the biggest, her biggest asset. Like some players, like a Julia Gosling, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, she's not necessarily the type of player that's going to go net front. You know what I mean? I don't think you want her to be net front. It's using that speed, for her to get around. I will say a lot of the practices, I do see her working on things late. So I do wonder if it's just trying to get that breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
It is, if we see the minutes aspect of thing continue, that is something that, when they get back, I'd be interested to ask Steve O'Rourke, obviously formulate it better, but see, what his thought process is behind it. Is, yeah, I'm sure you do when you see the third line, as not to directly compare with the men's team, but with the Kraken, I mean, you can't just kind of shove that fourth line in the corner. Like, you've got to kind of encourage that and let them do what they're doing. So yeah, I think that makes sense. But also too, yeah, you mentioned it with maybe the expectation, but I know, to an extent, teams don't at all care about what we expect, right?
Yeah.
Uh, to an extent, you're looking for more here, and I think the team believes there's more there. I think Danielle believes there's more there, but
Mm-hmm.
you're right. There's some aspects where I'm like, hey, I'm not seeing you. I'm seeing your line mates. I'm seeing Hannah Bilka. Jesse Eldred has been in the positions. It's unfortunate they haven't gone for her. But yeah, I'm very intrigued by this, because this is somebody that when you brought up expansion, right? And again, that's a different
Mm-hmm.
thing. Who knows what this league's gonna do? When Seattle deals with the problem that everybody else in the league was lamenting by Seattle coming in, there are decisions to be made. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And again, we are very early into the season.
Yeah.
We're going to have to go a while. But this is also something as well. I mean, you bring up not knowing the Canadian national team, not to go on a tangent because I know we got to get to the goalies, but she was scratched for one of the rivalry series games toward the end. Danielle Serdachny was for Team Canada. So for a Canadian team that really, really struggled in the rivalry series,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not able to go out there and at least do something to where they might shake things up and put you out there, that also maybe is a little bit telling. You know what I mean? So it's a good point. I do want to bring up, I don't know if it fits directly in this, but because we're on the topic of ice time, I
Yeah.
thought it was interesting. Jenna Buglioni, I believe it was ahead of the Montreal game. I believe it was Buglioni got hit and left the Fleet game. I
Mm-hmm.
think it was. I asked Steve O'Rourke, I said, hey, what's the update essentially on Jenna Buglioni? he he starts off saying, "I know we're supposed to say upper body, but it's a concussion," which concussions are difficult. Um, about two and a half an hour and a half before this game against Boston, she was listed as a scratch. So I thought, okay, she's still dealing with the concussion. It's fine. And then about 30 minutes before the game, it changes and she's lifted as the 13th forward, which I thought was fascinating. And I was like, hey, if you're coming back off a concussion and you're the 13th forward, odds are you're not playing,
Mhm.
depending on how it goes. And yeah, she's given 0 minutes of time on ice in this game against Boston. So she sat on the bench, she suited up, and she operated the door. But I will say that is an update. I guess it's good that she's feeling good enough to suit up. So I
Yeah.
thought that was fascinating because that was something too that O'Rourke has talked about on the last homestand. Dylan was he was asked how he'd use his extra player. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
He had a long quote about not thinking that it was necessarily worth it because if you're going to be the extra, and Seattle's been in an interesting situation with their extra because Lindy Lobdell had to slot in with the Terrell Nova hit, but he mentioned, he says, I don't think it's good for a player to just be on the bench and wonder when they're going to get in the game. So I don't know. Interesting to see how that's kind of planned out because obviously he's new to this league's rules, but nice to kind of update it and see that Jenna is at least feeling better, feeling good enough to suit up, but kind of interesting to just have her sit on the bench there and not touch the ice at all.
Yeah, and it's been a rough season for Jenna. Like it's just been so rough, right? Because dealing with multiple injuries now, concussion being the latest one, just not what already having to make the difficult transition from college into the professional league and everything. It's just been a rougher road than I think anybody would have wanted for their first round pick for the Torrent there. But she's a warrior. She's going to fight through it. She's going to find her way back out there. And there's still a lot of season left for her to kind of figure things out and finish that transition to the professional game and go from there. And I know that they're still very high on what she can bring to the team overall. And again, silver lining, it's meant that the third line could kind of shift around and become what they've become and really help out the team there. Last topic to cover before we go here uh, is, and I originally had this phrased, I phrased it this way prior to Schroeder coming out and playing the way that she has these last couple of games. But I was going to ask you the question, Charles, of whose crease is it? Because Hannah Murphy obviously was starting and picking up wins and incredible performances. We talked about the Montreal game and was very much, look, frankly, outplaying what Grin Schroeder was doing in her opportunities, and it felt like Steve O'Rourke was very much saying like, okay, this is the hot hand, this is the goaltender that we're going with in Hannah Murphy. But Schroeder has come out these last two games, played very solid, picks up first win of the season, like you mentioned earlier, against Toronto. I thought definitely put the Torrent in a position to win tonight in Boston. Only allowed the 2 goals, and I thought played very solid there. So it's maybe going to be back to more of just kind of riding the hot hand and O'Rourke managing things that way. But it does feel like it's going to be less of Grin Schroeder really being the definitive starter, and then CJ or Hannah Murphy work in from time to time. I think we're really looking at a true proper goalie tandem group here between Hannah Murphy and Corinne Schroeder.
Right. I'll start with Schroeder. Um, I mentioned to you in the beginning of the season, I thought maybe some of the thoughts on her were kind of rough because even it was even mentioned on the broadcast, thoughts of a slow start. I was like, hey, she's also dealing with a lot of early prep. Like Seattle doesn't necessarily start hot, right?
Yeah.
That's something that we could talk about at a different point. They don't start hot. Boston starts hot. They start out tonight, and they scored on a 2-0. Any on
Yeah.
O is going to be difficult for me to blame the goalie, Dylan.
Yep. Fair.
So that one was tough, and it's the volume. I mean, oh no, I was going to bring that up with Murphy. Sorry, I'll take that one. But no, she, as you mentioned, give you a chance to win, especially on the PK, a bunch of different opportunities where, the fleet kind of gets you out of sorts, but Schroeder's there to backstop you, especially in that second period tonight where your offense does effectively nothing and you're kind of living in your own defensive zone. Corinne Schroeder stands tall and makes sure, hey, we're going to still be in this because I'm going to have to make these saves. And then the shootout, to stop all of them. Granted, you could maybe look at one of the attempts as a mishandle, but still, you have to be in the right position, right? I just think she's been pretty solid for you. It's hard for me to ask for too much more. Granted, O'Rourke mentioned maybe some with a rebound control, and that's natural. I think that makes sense. I would agree with that. Hannah Murphy, as I mentioned earlier, did not expect any of this. Again, GM Megan Turner knows more than me. I tell her that often when I see her at Climate Pledge Arena. But to see what I was thinking of when you were talking about bringing it up, kind of the way that she started, it's not like she's been sheltered per se, where she's, her defenders are filtering out the high danger chances. She's only kind of seen weak shots from the point. She's dealt with a ton, volume, a variation of different looks, up, in, and tight. She's doing everything. She's got the size. I know you mentioned it when we talked about it earlier, I think in the last episode. She's more, archetype wise closer to Corinne Schroeder.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's exciting. When I bring up again the big scary looming expansion thing, if you're going to have to make these decisions, unfortunately, who are you keeping of the three goalies? I think it's Hannah Murphy, and I don't think really it's a question. I would go out and say it. I think you already kind of said it, but I'll just say it more blatant. Hannah Murphy is your 1A, which I didn't expect any of this. I am interested because, when you and I were talking ahead of the last 3 games of the 5-game homestand, right, we thought maybe there'd be more management in terms of how they dole those out. Looking at the rest of the schedule, right, obviously February, they're not playing. Who knows what they'll be playing in Milan? Because I don't believe that there was a report today that they'll be ready for the men's games, but that means they're not going to be ready for the women's game. Wonderful. Excellent. Anyway, you can kind of space this out. You're not going to see a ton of schedule. What's the word? Congestion. Thank you, Dylan. I know you did that telepathically. You helped me out there. You're not going to see a ton of that. The closest thing is later this month, you play Vancouver on the 25th in Denver at Ball Arena. And then 3 days later in TD Place in Ottawa, you play the Charge. But that's 3 days. That you could easily look at that and brush it aside, depending on what happens in Vancouver. You look into March, and then it kind of picks up once they get back from the Olympics. They play the 11th of March, 2 days later, 2 days later, 4 days later, 2 days later. There's kind of that in March. But by then, this big push they keep talking about. Do you want to be messing around with, trying seeing who's going to be hot or throwing people out cold, right? I imagine by then you'll want to have things locked up. So I do wonder how this plays out, because as I mentioned to you off camera, I asked Steve O'Rourke on a call we had with the entire coaching staff in the middle of December. I said, hey, how do you view this tandem? Because, in the pregame pressers and the postgame pressers, he's kind of been like, oh, yes, all of our goalies are good, which I would agree with, but it doesn't provide a lot of insight in what the thought process is. But he did mention that, oh, goodness, I'm on the spot and I forgot his name, but their goaltender coach, I feel bad. I want to give people respect to their name. Their goaltender coach and CJ have been working on. He didn't name what it was, and I guess that makes sense. So, some other team doesn't hear it and then attack CJ, whenever they would play, which seems silly, but you get any edge you can. They've been working on something that the coaching staff wanted CJ to improve upon. So that provides maybe a little bit of an insight as to why they haven't been addressing. I would also think that the point you brought up, I think it was last episode, I don't think it was the one before that, about similar styles of play in Schroeder and Murphy. I think that plays into it. But CJ did dress today, which was cool. Mm-hmm. You do want to see that. I know that can be tough. But yeah, no, it's fun. I really like I'm a big goalie guy. Sue me.
Yeah.
It's just been there are just so many fun storylines with this team, Dylan. I think that's part of why you and I both really like doing this show.
Hmm.
We can go from the different aspects of the different forward lines, how the defensive pairs are going, and then this goaltender group. You've got as long as things keep going this way. I don't know if we expect Hannah Murphy to only allow like one goal a game the rest of the year, but you've got one of the best up and coming young goalies. Again, if this continues in the league, you've got one of the league's shutout leaders, and then Carly Jackson, who's shown more than capable of coming in on any night, and being athletic and moving around on top of being the personality that they are. So it's fun. But yeah, I think Hannah Murphy's your 1A, which not what I would have thought I'd be saying, but
Yeah, I think Steve O'Rourke's going to let it play out. I think if I had to guess, rides whichever goalie's on the hot streak. You play both of them enough, and you kind of lean 2-1 in terms of starts, maybe in the direction of whoever's hot in the moment, and then you kind of go from there. Goalie coach for the Seattle Torrent, by the way, is Sheldon Gordson. Just to throw that out there. Um, yeah, I think that's what we're going to see. And I think that, look, it would be normal for Hannah Murphy as a rookie goaltender, and this applies to any professional league around the world, to have good performances and to struggle at times, to have very much a 2 steps forward, maybe 1 step back, or in Hannah Murphy's case so far, it was like 4 steps forward, 1 step back, maybe with that New York game. But I think that's going to be normal, and the fact that they don't need her to be lights out, only allowing 1 goal a game, because they have Corinne Schroeder as another goaltending option, I think is going to be something that is going to benefit them down the stretch. It's just interesting because for the vast majority of teams around the PWHL, this isn't really a question. Like, most teams in the league don't run a goalie tandem. You know what I mean? Like, it is like kind of
right.
more of a straight up 1A, just 1 and 2. There is no 1A, 1B type
No.
scenario. And so there's not like a lot of precedent. I was like trying to go through other teams and try to figure this out, and see what other teams have kind of done in the past. I mean, Minnesota's sort of doing that right now, but it feels like
Mm,
Nicole Hensley has kind of run away with the job there.
right.
But they have split their games, 5-5 so far through the 10 that they've played. So maybe that isn't the case. But it certainly feels that way whenever I watch them. But for the most part, it's not something that we see in the PWHL. So it is going to be interesting to see how head coach Steve O'Rourke handles it, how both goaltenders continue to perform. It's nice seeing Schroeder play the way that she's been playing here recently. It's obviously fantastic to have your rookie perform the way that Hannah Murphy's playing. It's a good problem to have. And I'm sure
Yes,
that that's what Steve O'Rourke would tell us when we ask him when the Torrent come back to Seattle.
right. I think that's ultimately, again, I would rather be sitting here talking to you about these different things, like even going back to the defensive side things. Lindy Lobdell slots in, and she's
Mhm.
I think you could baseline say she's fit in as much as you'd like her to be. You're not asking too much of her as a third pairing D. But then she'll go and sit out when Aneta Haralova comes back in on we talk about the third line and their share of minutes. I'd rather have all of these problems that we're talking things
Yeah,
that we're talking about be relevant than, hey, you need more talent here. I would rather have these problems now and sort through this. I'm just excited, Dylan. It's just great to be back.
it
It's just
is.
great to be back.
It is. No, and I'm really looking
Yes.
forward to being back on a regular schedule with you, doing this podcast, talking about this. Excited for them to come home as well, and play some home games and be able to see those in person, as well as just horrible timing for my pre-planned trip back home for the holidays, with that schedule of 3 games in 5 days or whatever at Climate Pledge. So really excited to be able to see the team play in person again at home. I know all the Torrent fans are as well. Excited to go back to CPA and check out the team. Want to thank you for making the time and doing this with me, Charles. And want to thank everybody for listening as well. That's going to do it for this episode of the Downpour. Thank you so much, and we will see you all next time.